Let's get right to it. NBC's Hans Nichols is here from the White House. What is the new goal line of defense? Because we've heard a lot about moving the goalposts.
Well, look, as it pertains to the shutdown, Ari, I think it's clear that we have a ceasefire. We don't have a truce. In the next 24 to 48 hours, what matters the most is the reaction to this, because we know the parameters of the debate, but we don't know the tone. And so often with President Trump, we see him make an announcement or we see him make a policy decision, and then he waits for the reaction to come in. I think the key reaction we need to hear from House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is the State of the Union on Tuesday night back on, because if so, that could allow the country a chance to come together. It would also give the president a big megaphone to make his point directly in front of the speaker and use all the trappings of the State of the Union to drive home his point. And that's really one of the big questions we have right now. Mitch McConnell says he's going to try to get this signed and get the CR through the Senate today. We'll see how quickly the House moves. But listen to how President Trump put it when he was talking about the federal workers.
I will make sure that all employees receive their back pay very quickly or as soon as possible. It'll happen fast. I am asking Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell to put this proposal on the floor immediately. After 36 days of spirited debate and dialogue, I have seen and heard from enough Democrats and Republicans that they are willing to put partisanship aside, I think, and put the security of the American people first.
You know, Ari, in the history of Washington, D.C., it's not like committees ever really solve anything, right? And we don't quite know the makeup of this committee. It looks like it will have some members of Congress. The president also hinted that they have some law enforcement on there. But committees rarely come up with anything innovative. They usually come up with the status quo and allow everyone to sign off what the status quo is and say, well, look, this was blessed by committee. It's unclear to me, with the rightward forces pulling Donald Trump. You heard from Mark Meadows there saying he trusts the president on this. It's unclear to me if Donald Trump would accept something which would be status quo coming out of the committee, given the position he's put himself in. But we've got 3 weeks to figure this all out. All right.
Did the White House announce this afternoon to distract from the indictment of Donald Trump's longest-serving advisor in politics?
That's a good question. I don't have a clear answer to that. That would require a lot of sort of understanding of just what the strategy is and how much the White House is feeling the pain on the shutdown. Remember, the president's had a pretty brutal 48 hours in terms of news cycles. Not only do you have to capitulate to Nancy Pelosi on on canceling the State of the Union, he also last night in that meeting there when he was meeting with conservative leaders and other Republican lawmakers, he seemed almost resigned to the fact that the shutdown was getting out of his hand. They faced a torrent of negative headlines here. So I don't have an answer for you then, Ari. It does seem to me plausible why they decided to end the shutdown now, at least temporarily, not simply as a matter to distract from the Mueller investigation and what happened down in Florida. All right.
Hans Nichols on quite a Friday, even by the standards of 2019. Appreciate your reporting. A lot more coming on the indictment of Roger Stone in a moment. That's part of why I'm anchoring our special coverage. But I want to get into a big story today that we do know affects millions of Americans. This is a deal now to end the longest federal government shutdown in U.S. history, at least temporarily. Let's look for you at what's in it. This bill would fund all affected departments through February 15th. No money for the border wall. That's why it looks like a temporary cave for Trump. Congress then gets essentially 3 weeks, as I was just discussing with Hans, to negotiate a Homeland Security bill. And that has all kinds of requests, including border security measures, humanitarian assistance. If it doesn't work out, then what you have from Trump is an argument that he could do it all over again and shut it down again. And he has the powers afforded to him under the Constitution to do that, or, of course, to try to get into this as a national emergency. That's the other off-ramp we've heard so much about. Now, the president had a message for these hundreds of thousands of federal employees who nobody says did anything wrong, but went without 2 paychecks, which was a breaking point for many. Let's take a look at that.
I want to thank all of the incredible federal workers and their amazing families who have shown such extraordinary devotion in the face of this recent hardship. You are fantastic people. You are incredible patriots. Many of you have suffered far greater than anyone but your families would know or understand. And not only did you not complain, but in many cases you encouraged me to keep going because you care so much about our country and about its border security.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.